Okay, let's rewind. The animated armor isn't holding the long swords. It is riding it like a skateboard.
Oh, right. Okay.
One for each foot,
The
skiing across the ground.
rug of smothering is tied like a cape on its back. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Survival Check, your unofficial A to Z guide to the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition monster manual. My name is Zach, and tonight I am your crazed artificer locked in his lab, and as always, along for the ride are the various living objects that I've programmed to be my friends. Tevis, Shayne, and Anderson, how's it going, nerds?
What is my purpose?
As long as I get to be the rug.
Ooh. Yeah, I guess that's a good Who is the rug, who's the sword, and who's the armor here?
I am Lamp.
You are Lamp. That works
That's
too.
not
Shane's a lamp.
I'm obviously the sword.
Okay, I guess I'm obviously the armor.
All right, there we go. We got the rug, the armor done. Episode over. We'll see you guys next week.
rug.
The rug of smothering is pretty great. But hello, welcome back. Tonight we are doing animated objects. So kind of a big jump from Aboleth and Angels all the way down to
big jump backwards.
Big jump backwards. We are now talking lamps and talking not even talking, they're just living lamps and stuff. No celestial beings, no eldritch horrors, just lamp.
Hold on, let me roleplay my character real quick. Hold on.
Yep.
How'd I do?
You did pretty good, man. I don't think I get this man an Oscar.
Yeah, pretty damn good. All right, so let's start off like we always start off. Prior knowledge, thoughts on the monster, and has anyone ran them before? I've ran them a few times, but I'd love to throw them over to you guys first.
Yeah, I've literally ran into, this is Andy speaking, Anderson. I've run into every one of these three animated behemoths, these big bad evil guys, the world-ending calamities known as animated objects. And every single one of those fights has been so lackluster.
I would like to counter that and say you guys had one fight with this where
I remember
one of your party members was murdered by one of these objects.
I don't think I was there for that then.
No, that was the beginning. That was the beginning.
It was the first session of Avernus. You guys were in the Elf Song Tavern, and you guys decided to get a little rowdy, specifically your Total Barbarian.
Oh, you're right.
So the animated armor bodyguard had to get involved and crack him in half.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess.
Talk about
I wouldn't consider that being me involved in the fight when the triggering condition was met by a party member who happened to get bodied by the
right. I mean, that's fair. That was
happy.
That was something else. But yeah,
there was another time though. Like when we first like started playing, you had a room of animated armors that you panicked us. There was real panic in all of our voices because there was like 7 or 8 like animated armors against like 6 level 2s, and we couldn't roll like above an 18 to hit this thing.
What?
Yeah, they walked into it.
Yeah, but it was then revealed after all the panic and chaos that it was meant to happen, that we were supposed to, die and get knocked out.
Gotcha.
Well, that room was very deadly. And you guys just kind of, I think you played with the armor at first. You like walked up to it and someone like was like jingling the arms around and stuff.
That's
totally
funny.
not like
when we first started playing.
This was like the second session ever of Dungeons and Dragons I've played.
Pro
That's
tip:
great.
don't just touch a random piece of armor in a ruin.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, I think on that note, though, there was a second encounter with animated armor in Avernus. Am I remembering this correctly? In the dungeon with the witch that, like the dungeon of the dark three, the dead three.
It did attack everyone else.
Oh, in the Vanthipur's villa. That's actually different. That was a
not in the Vanthipur villa, under the bathhouse.
Yes. Oh, those were flying swords, and I think there was animated
Oh.
armor.
I think it was reflavored to be gauntlets. I think they were flying
Yes,
gauntlets.
it was. It was. They were flying swords reflavored to be gauntlets.
Yeah.
Which you are right. Which also a cool fight. But again, that Avernus party just always gets. Avernus is a tough
Just
campaign.
gets beat down.
So I've
The-
fought a bunch of animated objects, but I don't think I've ever put one in a game myself.
Mhm.
I have to say, I am a sucker for using them. That's why you guys have experiences of playing against them because I like them a lot.
One of the most memorable animated armor encounters I personally had was I ran a 1-2 shot for Curse of Strahd in the coveted Death House, and there is an animated armor in there, and you're all level 1s. I think you're level 1 or level 2 for this encounter, and
Wow.
it
That's-
was rough.
That
Yeah.
is actually one of the most famous. Like, if you do research on animated
Oh,
armor,
yeah.
like animated armor, it is
Oh, yeah.
notorious. Like, it's like known as the Strahd animated armor because how brutal it can be. But let's go and do the part 1, the history of the monster. Let's talk about the history of these creatures in Dungeons and Dragons. So, this is like a thing that we do every episode at this point. So Aarakocra, mid 80s. Aboleths, early 80s. Angels, late 70s. Where are you guys placing the first time these 3 creatures are seen in the Dungeons and Dragons universe?
Yesterday.
What did you say,
I
Tevis?
have no idea.
The 30s, the Great Depression.
I know it's a podcast, but Zach spit out his tea.
I did put out my tea for the people who can't
No.
see.
First edition. First book ever.
Okay, we got first edition. We got the 30s.
I remember what you said, so I'm gonna keep my opinion myself.
Yeah. So, let us get in our time machine, but this time we only have to move the lever a little bit back because we're going to the year of 2014.
What the fuck? Okay.
2014
Off by like 80 years, but whatever.
Yeah, so the animated objects has a little bit longer history if we do that, but if we're talking about specifically the animated armor, the flying sword, and the rug of smothering, these are all 5th edition monsters. They might have appeared in different flavor wise or anything, but like unlike the other creatures we've talked about in this podcast, is they don't have some like storied first edition adventure where like you have to go into a house made of animated objects or anything. Like, there's no notorious thing that brings up the specific animated objects this early. We don't even get constructs till later, but I'm gonna leave all that information until we do like golems and stuff because I think that's more tied in.
More interesting than
Yeah.
the constructs.
Yeah, these guys, they're kind of basic. If we actually look at animated objects and like turning objects and like weapons and armor into actual like somewhat living beings that can fight, we can actually go back to first edition. So we can go back to 1974. But they weren't monsters back then. It was actually a spell that you could use. More specifically, an alteration spell, which D&D fun fact is transmutation wasn't always called transmutation magic in Dungeons and Dragons. The first few editions, it was called alteration magic. But as we go forward to 3rd edition and 2nd edition, still the only way you really get these animated objects is through the spell animated object, which I mean, the spell is named after the monsters. The monsters, or is it the other way? I don't know.
Is it the chicken or the egg, you know?
Is it the mechanical chicken or the mechanical egg? But so, which even like 6th level spells, even back then, were pretty high level spells, and even in 5th edition, animate object is a 5th level spell. It's not a 6th level; they brought it down one. So 5th level spells, even though that's kind of like mid tier wizard, a higher mid tier wizard, and it's kind of still kind of like a lackluster spell because what is polymorph 4th level? Or something, or 5th level?
I think it's you get it at player level 8 for a druid. So that's what, 4th level?
Yeah, that may be 4th or 5th level, which I just think polymorph you're more likely to use than animate objects. And animate, like, it's a cool flavor, but that's about like where we get it.
4th level.
That's 4th level. Okay,
Yeah.
so like I've never actually seen anyone use animate objects within a game I've run or played. just because it's like, I mean, everyone wants
Not
to be
worth
Mickey
it.
Mouse in Fantasia, making all the brooms do the do 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 do, but like it's not practical.
Everybody wants that.
I mean, everyone wants the right.
Yeah, totally.
But okay, so like I said, you don't get these as monsters, first edition, second edition, third edition, but we actually see them as monsters, or form of them as monsters in 3.5, which is, for those who don't know, it goes first edition, second edition, third edition, 3.5 edition, fourth edition, fifth edition. There was just a lot of controversy around third edition, and they like wanted to change up combat and stuff, and 3.5 actually veers off when fourth edition comes out and becomes Pathfinder, like the same people who developed 3.5 turns into Pathfinder. So I think that's important to note because how the animated objects are handled in this monster manual in 3.5. So Pathfinder, for those who have not played, from my experience, has always been more crunchy. It's a lot more open sourced. You have a lot more choices. It's a little more crunchy though. There's like rules for everything. And you see that in the animated objects of 3.5. So unlike 5th edition, instead of giving us 3 monsters like animated armor, flying sword, and rug of smothering, instead we get a category just called animated objects. And through there, you get tiny through colossus, each of them having a stat block. Each of these stat blocks, too, had like various plug and plays. So let's say you wanted an animated house, because you could do that because they had a stat block for colossus sized animated objects. It would give you different speeds. If it had like 4 legs, no legs, wheels, it would give you different types of damage types for the different types of object you are. The hit points would relatively stay the same, but it was a really interesting way of letting you kind of animate objects whatever you want and kind of have a stat block ready to plug and play. And this is the edition where I think is a much better way than they did in 5th edition. I understand what they did in 5th edition. They wanted to streamline it more. But I like the idea of 3.5 being able to have these generic stat blocks for animated objects and able to take what you need and plug and play. And I even in the stat blocks for 3.5, like there's even wheels. So it's like if you have a tiny object with like 4 legs, you go this fast, but like you can add wheels to your animated objects. So I'm just picturing like animated house wheels just going slowly down a gentle slope at your party. I don't know why, but I want to do that. But other than that, 3.5, 4th edition, I don't even think they make an appearance in 4th edition. At least I couldn't find anything. Construct as like a monster type didn't really come into until 5e. It was like always thrown around, but like the construct type, which all these animated objects weren't even really a thing. So these 3 monsters are very 5th edition.
When did 5e come out? What year?
2014.
Okay.
It might have come out a little bit earlier, but 2014 is like Monster Manual, which I mean, I guess they would all have come out at the same time. So 6 years ago.
Wow.
But yeah, I know.
Is there any word about them making a new edition? Because like this is pretty popular. The 5th
It
edition
is.
one.
I think they'll probably go the route that they did with like 2nd and 3rd edition, where they're going to just keep throwing source books at us. Because I mean, like you said, 5th edition is the most popular Dungeons and Dragons has ever been. They're incredibly profitable right now. I don't think with all this steam they're getting that they're going to like switch up the system, and because everyone knows
That's what I was thinking.
They're throwing out a new book every 2 to 3 months, you know.
Yeah.
And they got the cycle. Like we have Tasha's coming out soon. That's pretty much going to be like Xanathar's do with more spells.
Yeah, I'm pumped for that one.
Okay.
Super stoked.
I like
the
Xanathar's.
alternate art is awesome.
I know. I'm waiting for that to go.
It's always awesome.
I don't know. Feros's was pretty disappointing.
So yeah, which I don't think 6th edition we're gonna get for a very long time.
Yeah.
Which I mean it's fine. 5e, like I said, is very popular. I don't think they're gonna do anything. And I mean honestly, I would love to see like Spelljammer and all that stuff come to 5th edition. There's some cool stuff they could bring back from the past. But yeah.
For us, this podcast has like a 3-year timeline.
Exactly. But so dear listener, usually right now I'd still be ranting on about the history of these monsters, but that's it. We're done. We're done with the history. So like I said, 2014. These three monsters are 5e native monsters, I guess is a good way to put it. There was spells that could bring animated objects to life, but they didn't have stat blocks. They came out in 3.5 with like generic tags you can put on animated objects. But other than that, animated armor, flying sword, rugged smothering, new stuff. So let's cover what they are in 5th edition. So let's actually, being as kind of like generic monsters as they are, I think the animated armor flavor text might be some of my favorite flavor text in the book. So
Okay.
I'm gonna read it. So this is on page 19 of the monster manual. It lists all
canon.
3 flavor text. Yes, this is canon. This is how I'm reading this is how 5th edition has it, and I think that's important to note. Thank you, Anderson, because there's some wording in it that kind of makes you gives you a little bit more freedom. So this is animated armor. This empty steel shell clamors as it moves, heavy plates banging and grinding against one another like the vengeful spirit of a fallen knight. Ponderous but persistent, this magical guardian is almost always a suit of plate of armor. And I want to really note, almost always. So it doesn't always have to be a suit of armor. I mean, most of the time it will be, but they use that vague terms so that you can like flavor text it, which is a little bit of 3.5. I wish I would have done a little bit more than that. To add on to that, this is the second paragraph. To add to its menace, animated armor is frequently enchanted with scripted speech, so the armor can utter warnings, demand passwords, or deliver riddles. Rare suits of animated armor are able to carry on an actual conversation, which I think, yeah,
Fuck.
right? I like that a lot. I mean, my favorite sentence is heavy plates banging and grinding against one another like the vengeful spirit of a fallen knight. That is some cool flavor text.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it kind of gives you some already like built-in adventures or built-in social encounters you can do with animated armor. Like you can enchant it with script, you can give it riddles, which I love animated armor that does riddles as well.
That's what I'm grabbing onto right there.
Yeah. And then if you go forward with flying sword and rugged smothering, I'm not going to read their paragraphs. But they also kind of have this vagueness that alludes to 3.5. So in Flying Swords, it said, swords are the most common weapons animated with magic, but axes, clubs, daggers, maces, spears, and even self-loading crossbows are also known to exist in animated object form. So again, it's like, hey, here's the stat block for the animated sword, but you can flavor it as all these
Make it
different
your
things.
own.
Yeah. Which, I mean, the crossbow thing is a cool idea, but you'd have to change a little bit more in the stat block. And then rug smothering is really kind of the only one that doesn't like give you that much option because it is a rug. It says you can be like a fake flying carpet though. And yeah.
Could you imagine giving your party a flying carpet, but it's actually just a rug of smothering?
That would be so
and
good.
It just like it's super magically enhanced by some evil wizard, and as it triggers at 30 feet above ground level where it just wraps up and grabs whoever and falls.
Wow, actually I like that a lot. That would be like a super advanced. That would
Man, he gives one to each party member.
yeah.
No.
That would be good. Another thing to note about the 5e lore of these is that they are constructs. So I said these are somewhat newer monster types, but with them being constructed nature, they don't sleep, eat, drink, or require air. So, I mean, they're animated objects. But along with that, there is this caveat to the animated objects that says the magic that animates an object is dispelled when the construct drops to 0 hit points. An animated object reduced to 0 hit points becomes inanimate and is too damaged to be much of use or value to anyone. I think it's interesting that they add or value to anyone. So it's almost like saying if you beat it up,
It's busted.
No. Yeah. There's no moral quandary there.
Exactly. And yeah, I think I was listening to, oh my God, I can't remember who. I wasn't listening to anything. I was reading from a book called The Monsters Know What They're Doing, which is a super cool book by Keith Amon. I think I might have referenced them in the podcast before.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big tome of all the different monsters in the monster manual and how different ideas how to run them. And in the book, he says that like it's really good to throw these animated objects at your party if you want a fight where there's no moral quandaries, because they're lifeless machines that are here to kill you.
You got some murder hobos? Throw them a rug.
Throw them some murder swords. Throw 'em a rug. Yeah. So, with that being said, real world origins is what we always try to touch on here. I wish I could tell you like when the first time like animated objects were shown in real world history. Actually, if anyone's listening in the future, the past, the present, if you're a time traveler, also let me know. But let me know yes, show me your ways first. But let me know in the comments if anyone knows when the first like stories or folklores or myths happened where objects were actually like given life, because I'm very interested in that, like how that myth came along, and I just couldn't find anything on it other than the idea of pareidolia, which are you guys familiar with that?
Not at all.
So pareidolia is, like always those pictures that get posted online of like a garbage can, but it has like two little circles and stuff and looks like it has a face. Or like when
phenomenon of like us finding faces or like putting
yes, that's exactly what it is.
Okay, cool.
It's the idea of that, like if we look at inanimate objects that as human beings we want to like see faces and stuff, because that's how we've evolved, is to like make sure that we can see everything and kind of understand what's going on, process our surroundings. So sometimes we'll have this thing called pareidolia where we will see objects that aren't living, but we will put living features on them, and that pops up through history, so that there might be like a connection there. But that again, that's me just like pulling at ropes.
That makes sense, because that's a trait that we have developed for survival. As we use that feature to identify predators' faces as they're stalking us in bushes, shrubs, whatever it is, back in the wild, way, way, way back in the day. And it was to help us find these things, and the traits just carried on for so long. Then if you look at the front of a beetle, like the car, like you're just like, man, that car is so freaking happy.
Yeah, but, exactly.
But that same trait can also save you from a freaking mountain lion in the woods. So.
Right. So that's where my guess is, that like where all these stories that come from like living inanimate objects come from. But again, if anyone does know like the beginning myth or has like done any research, let me know, because I'm really interested.
You ever seen that old hieroglyph of the guy like with his hands in the air and there's a triangle above his head?
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm not saying aliens, but aliens. The other real world origins is Disney. That's what I got. Like, like we have La Belle et la Bête, Beauty and the Beast. I mean, that's the first time we've ever experienced singing.
Yeah, I feel like there's got to be an older film example.
Yeah, I mean, Beauty and the Beast was was actually a story from back in the day. So
right, yeah, it was a French story from the 1700s.
So they at least go back to the 1700s.
Exactly.
I'd imagine it would go back to like ancient Egypt.
Yeah, I feel like it goes way back, like early origins, because I mean, there is a Japanese spirit that I can't remember the name of, and even if I did, I would not try to pronounce it. What?
An onigiri.
It might be. There's a lot of Japanese spirits that like actually take the form of living objects, but there's one in particular that starts with a T that I do not know how to say, and I don't remember what it's called, but that also comes from like a very long time ago, that like the spirits used to take over and like inhabit like dolls and stuff, which I didn't even think about dolls, but dolls. Living dolls are creepy. And then Mickey Mouse and Fantasia. I brought that up earlier, but that was like my favorite movie as a kid. So like the Mickey Mouse doing the thing, and then he kept cutting the brooms, and then the more the brooms would come and they would walk and stuff. And don't give me that face.
Harry?
Tsukumogami?
Yes.
The power of Google.
Google, yes. The ultimate divination machine. But yeah, so it pops up. So I mean, and everyone who's listening to this, or you ask anyone about like living objects, they probably can like point you to 10 different things where it's like, oh, the brave little toaster, or Beauty and the Beast,
Wally.
Yeah,
that's not an animated object. That's science, brother. It's different.
Hey man, it's an animated object.
It's
a machine.
I mean, aren't we all?
Oh, whoa, man.
Whoa,
whoa, man.
We're all just in the Matrix.
We're all plugged in, man.
I think we're gonna get into this debate later, but I was gonna bring up the idea, like, are androids animated objects? But
I wouldn't say that.
If you're gonna throw out a no, why not?
we'll get into it later. Get into
We'll
it
go
later.
into it later.
All
This
right.
podcast is going to be 4 hours long.
Yeah,
The
so
last 3 hours is just debate about whether or not androids are animated objects.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to the monster stat block. Monsters stat block, not monsters. This is the second part of our show for those who are new to. Wow, words are hard tonight.
Okay, they're hard every day.
They're just hard. Yeah. I'm an animated armor, and whoever wrote all my script is just cursive and just scribbles. But part 2, monsters stat blocks. Let's look at them. Let's talk about them. What is your guys' first impressions of these 3 monsters? I guess we can start with animated armor. Anything
They
pop
don't
up?
speak common.
They don't speak.
They
speak
don't
anything.
speak.
Oh, that's not true. The flavor text says that they could
Well,
do
the animated
small
armor,
speech.
right?
Yeah, if we're talking animated armor. Yeah. So in the stat block, it says languages. It just has a dash. But in the flavor text, yeah, the great language dash. In the flavor text, it says that whoever created them or like can write scripted speech to it, and rare suits of animated armor are able to carry on actual conversations. So your animated armor could speak common, gnomish, goblin, dwarvish, abyssal, abyssal.
They have so many immunities.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, condition immunities.
My
Yeah.
goodness.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
so-
you can't be, deafened or blinded if you can't see or hear.
I mean, they all make sense. It's just there's just so many.
right. So
Blind, charmed, deafened, exhaustion, frightened, paralyzed,
And they have
petrified.
2 damage
Yeah.
immunities with poison.
What it doesn't say it's immune to, though, is the fear
It says
condition.
frightened.
Frightened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it? I'm dumb.
Leave that.
But you're
I
right,
literally
though.
just
It
read
doesn't
that. I was
say
like, fear, fear,
feared. It does.
Yeah, I'm not using frightened. I'm using the
They
feared
got
spell.
feared. Yes, but yeah. So blinded, charmed, definitely like pretty much every condition almost they're like can't be put in, which makes sense. They're like they're living armor. They're like you can't charm something. Oh god, that's another debate. Can you charm something that?
They're
Yeah.
not living armor.
It doesn't have.
But
All right, we're starting another podcast.
philosophical debates of monsters at 5e. So yeah, so they're immune to poison and psychic, which those aren't like the things that pop up the most in combat, but it's still pretty big, especially if your rogue is depending on poison. But I think the thing that is interesting about these creatures is they have blind sight, and this is the first time blind sight is popping up in the monster manual.
Oh,
So
yeah,
for those who
right.
don't know about what blind sight is, and I should specify this is blind sight 60 feet, but it is blind beyond that radius. Blind sight is almost kind of how I've always thought of it as like magical sonar. Like they don't have to see. They don't have eyes. They don't have vision. They just kind of sense in a 60-foot area around them what's there.
Vibrations, man.
Yeah,
They
vibrations,
feel 'em.
magic.
You ever watch Avatar: The
Oh,
Last
yeah.
Airbender? Think
Right.
Toph.
Yes.
So, and we should say they have a passive perception of 6 too, which is
That's good. Better than me when I roll.
fair. And they also are CR1, so they're low. They have an armor class of 18, which is pretty beefy for CR1. They have a decent amount of hit points at 33 for your low CR monster, and they have a speed of 25. So they, slowly meander at you in combat. Along with
I will say though that the 18 AC is nothing to shake a stick at.
Oh.
Like I mentioned back in the Eric Roker episode, if a person knows how what they're doing to make a character, they should have a +4 modifier or 5, on average, if they're using point buy or just like the standard array. So if you think about an average roll, right? So you have a 4 to 5 modifier. That means you need to have at least a 13 minimum to hit them, maybe 14. That's a 25 to 33% hit rate.
They
Like,
are
that is
beefy.
hard to hit.
I think
at
I
early
remember
levels.
that like the gauntlets in Avernus when you guys were fighting them, you guys had troubles hitting them. I think you guys had to use some AoE spells if I'm remembering correctly to take them out. I can't remember. And I mean, Snappy got beat up by him. Along with that, we have two things that let me double check. Let me flip the page so I can actually say this with confidence. It has two things that all three of these animated armor have. I mean, animated objects have. That is anti-magic. Oh God, I'm gonna mess up that word. Yeah, thank you.
Susceptibility.
So that means the armor is incapacitated while it is in the area of an anti-magic field, which is your party is not going to be able to do that much. It is a 7th or 8th level spell, so it is a pretty high level spell. So it's an 8th level spell. So these are CR1. You're probably not going to be fighting. Your party's not going to be fighting these unless there's like a lot of them or anything like that, like high level. Because if you have 8th level spells, you're a high level party. But you can dispel magic it. So that is a 2nd level spell. So
where is it?
It says if targeted by dispel magic, the armor must succeed on a con saving throw against the caster's spell save DC or fall unconscious for 1 minute. So just 1 minute.
Just 1 minute.
Yeah, it's not like anti-magic field, which just kind of like keeps it dead.
Just incapacitates it.
But you can dispel magic, which I think is pretty neat because usually your characters who are taking dispel magic, it doesn't really get brought up that often, and definitely not as often as counterspell. So it is like a good support spell that you can actually like use in this fight pretty well. So it gives your maybe supportish bards and wizards a little bit more like use, like makes them feel more useful in a fight. They also have false appearance, which all three of the animated objects have, which says when this monster remains motionless, it is indistinguishable from a normal suit of armor. So which that can be taken in different ways. So like, I mean, I guess straight up, like what I'm reading this, if you're doing rules as written, it kind of tells me like your party would have to look very hard to notice it as an animated armor if it is not moving. Because like really high, because it says.
I mean, I wouldn't even say you would be able to find out.
The only way I think you would be able to is like if you were searching really good, got a really high investigation check, and maybe like saw in the inside of the armor there was like a rune etched. Like I wouldn't say it's like moving or anything, but I would say that possibly you would, or like an Arcana check, your party would be able to see like the magical makings of the armor. But other than that,
I would say like if I was running a campaign or if I was running an encounter with this, I would definitely make it where if they don't ask for an Arcana check of some sort or ask to see if it's magically induced, I wouldn't let them find out.
I would say they'd really have to be searching the armor, which I mean, most parties I don't think are going to be like, I want to search every inch of this armor. So it's going to be pretty damn hard to find out, which is kind of terrifying. You're going through a haunted house and like, you're not going to take time to look at every single armor piece to see if it's going to kill you or not. So like, it's kind of
depending on what you've thrown at them before, they might just check every single little thing.
I was gonna say these guys got the same feel as a mimic, right? If you get hit by two, like two of these in a campaign, you are gonna stab every piece of mounted armor on the wall that you run by, just to double check. Like, are you animated, hacker? And just like you're gonna tilt your players.
That is absolutely, which is always fun. And then we go to its actions, and it has multi-attack, 2 melee attacks. It's a slam attack. Does 1d6 plus 2 bludgeoning, plus 4 to hit. Which, I mean, low levels, like Avernus throws an animated armor. I mean, the animated armor isn't part of that fight unless your party really makes it part of that fight, which the party I'm running made it part of that fight because they attacked the bartender. Well, one person in the party attacked the bartender, which brought the animated armor alive, but the animated armor like double slammed and pretty much just let the portal bleed out. So it can pretty much. That was a fun fight. The Elf Song, for those who have run Avernus, you know the Elf Song Tavern fight is always it's fun but tough. Anything else about the animated armor that you guys see that is pretty impressive.
Impressive?
No,
That
Or not
one,
impressive, or like-
Seems
the
pretty CR
one
running.
int score is pretty impressive.
I was gonna bring that up at the end of it because every animated object has an
Yeah.
int of
Yep.
1.
Yeah. So
I love it.
yeah, I think we talked about that at the end. That's a good idea. Let's go to flying, like the end of this part. Let's go to flying sword. Again, pretty much immune to all the conditions. Has blind sight. It has one higher passive perception at 7. The flying sword for a quarter challenge, a 1/4 challenge monster, has an armor class of 17, which is high. Like we were talking about a challenge rating 1 monster having 18 and being pretty damn impressive. This thing is 17.
50 fly
Nope,
speed.
there we are.
Whoa.
It is hover,
It
so
is
it's not going
hover,
to be like
though. It's
flying
not
in the air,
real
but
flight.
still, that's
Ew.
a speedy. That's a speedy sword or weapon, whatever you choose it to be. But
And it can't.
What?
Hold on, wait. Let me do math before I say this. It can hit harder than the animated armor too.
1d8 plus 1. Yeah. it can.
Well, it is a sword.
That's
true.
fair. That's
And-
fair.
If you
It
put
is
2
It is
animated
sharpened.
or flying swords in an animated armor, like in its hands, will the animated armor be able to hover?
I don't think so. No, because animated armor is
No.
probably heavy.
I don't
I like
know.
that idea.
It's plate armor. It's 60
Okay, so
pounds.
let's rewind. The animated armor isn't holding the long swords; it is riding it like a skateboard.
Oh, right. Okay.
One for each foot.
The rug
skiing
of
across the ground.
rug of smothering is tied like a cape on its back.
Animated
Exactly.
Voltron.
The ultimate animated object. Combine all 3. But yeah, again, high
That's
AC,
hilarious.
pretty fast. Blind sight
Yep.
and anti-magic.
Same
Yeah, false
immunities.
appearance. So the sword could just be laying there, and you'd be like, "Oh, cool sword."
Yeah. Same false appearance and anti-magic
Yep.
susceptibility.
So then
Susceptibility.
we jump over to the last animated object, which is the most fun of the animated objects, which is your rug of smothering. Same damage immunities, same condition immunities, blind sight still. You have the 2 traits that the other 2 have, but it has one trait that I don't. Maybe the oozes do and slimes have, but I don't know any other monster in the monster manual has, and that is damage transfer. So while your rug of smothering is doing what it does best, smothering your party member, it says while grappling a creature, the rug takes only half the damage dealt to it, and the creature grappled by the rug takes the other half.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It forcibly
are-
warding bonds the
These
person
are
it's holding.
deadly creatures. Monsters. Things.
Yeah. Rugs.
Rugs.
And the wise words of the unfortunately deceased Robin Williams. I can't believe it. I'm losing to a rug.
So true. So yeah, that's fun. That's cool. Like your bard gets wrapped up by a carpet and your barbarian is trying to get him free. Just taking like a great club and just bashing the rug, but your bard's in the center of it, just getting smashed also.
I could just imagine a barbarian just jumping into it, willingly getting wrapped and just like,
Yeah,
hit me!
Along with that, it has smother as its action. So it rolls the hit, and I don't think it does damage with smother. It grapples it first, and then it says until the grapple. It's
Yeah,
like
it does.
like the first hit doesn't do damage. I don't believe. So it says until the grapple ends, the target is restrained, blinded, and at risk of suffocating, which is
My
3.
god.
Yeah. And it says, and the rug can't smother another target. In addition, at the start of the turn, each of the target's turns, the target takes 2d6 plus 3 bludgeoning damage. And this is challenge rating 2, which that can be a deadly encounter.
Oh yeah.
It has 10 movement
Absolutely.
speed. I like to imagine the rug of smothering either walks like it has legs like an Aladdin, or it like slithers like a snake. But it has armor class of 12, which is low, but it's also low. I think is It's like a double-edged sword being low.
It's
It's
intentional.
it's intentional.
It's
Oh
intentional.
yeah, because you want to hit it, and then if you hit it, it hurts.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, if it's smothering, so it's like low.
Yeah.
It has an average hit point of 33. That's its health pool. But the something to note here is that the formula for a Rug of Smothering's hit points is 6d10.
60.
You have a chance of rolling a Rug of Smothering with 60 hit
One
points.
beefy rug.
If they grab onto something, that comes into an immediate 120.
Yeah, I was gonna say you kind of have to treat it like it's a
point
barbarian
pool.
in rage. You're having the damage.
Yeah. And that also means that your players are also taking like 120 points worth of damage if done right.
Which is
right?
going to CR2 is going to kill.
It's like
pretty much anyone in your party.
Everyone.
Pretty much anyone.
But it's just a rug. You can break out of the smothering. It's like a DC 13 strength check. Yeah, it's not super challenging to get out
like
of.
The bard.
But like just like theoretically, like if you make like an animated rug out of like a polar bear skin or like a tiger skin, you could just intentionally give it a max roll of 60.
Yeah, so you could definitely beef it,
which would be
beef
fun.
it up. Yeah, I didn't even notice that. That's a good point. Like the hit points you can roll for it, you can have a really beefy rug. So, with all the stat blocks, let's talk about what you, Tevis, and Anderson pointed out is it's low int, wisdom, and charisma, which I mean makes absolute sense why those are so low.
Oh, no. A good rug has some charisma.
I prefer you to call me.
I mean, fair.
I prefer you to call me by my character I'm role playing tonight.
Smothering. All right. So the rug and Tevis.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, excuse me. I'm the animated armor.
You can just call me Shayne.
Shayne.
You're kidding. You can call me Tevis. It's the only weird one.
I will have to say, like, I think these are low stats only for flavor wise. They don't affect anything with a creature. Because like normally you see low int, wisdom, and charisma, and you're like, oh, they're gonna be charmed. Can't do that. Or they're gonna get frightened. Can't do that either. Like, and I guess it helps you play with them. Like I said, they're kind of like angels, no morality, kind of just running straight and killing. Or body. They might not even kill. Like maybe you have a nice wizard and it's just like beat you up. But like I don't think they're low stats there, and I could totally be wrong. Are like a detriment to them in fighting. Like you can't manipulate that. You can't like normally if there's low stuff in stat blocks, you can manipulate as a player, but like
the only thing that I would like maybe argue is if you had a way to reduce its int or its charisma, because if something has an intelligence or any stat of 0, they die.
That is a very good point. Yes, so if you do have a way of reducing it, that is a very good point. You're only 1 point away, which is like.
But at in early levels, like, is there really a way to do that?
Unless it's homebrewed, because I think all those spells are much higher.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have anything else to say about their stat blocks before we move on to part 3 of the podcast? All right.
No.
So.
Nothing about stat blocks.
Okay. Let's do part 3. So part 3 is the part of the podcast where we talk about how we would use these objects in our own games, how you can use them in your games. We do this by breaking it up into social, exploration, and combat. So let's talk social. How would you guys use the Rug of Smothering, the flying sword, or we'll just say flying weapon, or animated armor as a social encounter? So not combat, not exploration. How would you use them as social?
I guess you could use the animated armor like the Invisible Butler spell.
Unseen Servant.
Someone could have a house. Yeah, thank you. Unseen Servant. To like a Grand Wizard or like a Wizard Tower could have like animated armor on every floor, just doing the meaningless physical activities.
Yeah, absolutely.
There could be like at a tavern, your party is like relaxing after a big fight, and all of a sudden a bard goes on. Let's say there's a bunch of like weapons and armor, stands around the whole tavern. And then as soon as he starts singing, they all start dancing.
Ooh.
And then the swords start cutting people's meats and cheese, Yeah.
That'd be cool.
That's about it.
So something I've been thinking of is for the Rug of Smothering.
Okay.
You get some kind of magic area, right? Whether it be like a small town, a cityscape, a wizard tower, whatever it is, but it's got to be like a fairly large area. And it's lavish, right? Like very luxurious, high cost, the finer
Fancy.
things of life. And if you enter this area, you can rent a flying carpet for just the city. Just the city. Pay like a gold coin, have it for a day. Right? Just drop it off in the next morning. You're flying around and it's just a magic carpet. You do what you gotta do. But if you decide to leave with it mid-flight, it triggers some kind of ability if it passes a threshold and it wraps onto you
I like
mid-flight
that. I like that a
and
lot.
drops and pummels. And if you hit the floor, you're taking half of the rug's damage and your damage.
I like that a lot. That's
it's suplexing you into the floor if you try to steal this
like that.
flying
I like that idea of like the anti-theft rug of smothering.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like the idea of putting all three of them together, like you guys had mentioned, but not as like a Voltron or anything.
Okay.
And having like the armor be like a guard dog, sort of. And I'm a sucker for riddles, so maybe he holds a shield in front of him, and like etched in the shield is a pretty challenging riddle, and you guys have to walk down this really lavish hallway, down some nice rugs, past some like other armor stands and like weapon stands hanging on the walls. It doesn't seem too sus, but then you get the riddle wrong, and they all trigger at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So my thought on it is I have this idea for like how an adventure could start. So let's say the party is at a tavern and they begin to hear a ruckus outside, and it's maybe like a small town, and everyone goes outside, and like walking in from the front gate is this very damaged animated armor. Like it looks beat up, it has dents in it, looks almost like it's charred, and it's slowly like walking almost like kind of like the robots in Terminator when they get destroyed and are kind of like glitching out as it's walking. But as it gets there, people start questioning it. But because it's only a script, it like answers riddles and stuff, and like the party has to figure out like what these riddles are, and like eventually it could like lead the animated armor was sent by a wizard who was maybe like taken over by like a hobgoblin tribe or something. But it's kind of like a social encounter and like trying to uncover the mysteries of how this animated armor got damaged or like what it came with. I think that would be cool. A cool way of using animated armor, and you could even do that like in ruins. Like maybe you find an animated armor that maybe was there long ago, like hundreds of years ago when a wizard was there, and maybe the animated armor isn't like fully powered, but like it can speak in scripts, or even maybe one of the animated armor that can like help. Can hold a conversation. So maybe the party has to like help the animated armor get the rest of its magic, so it can find out what happened in the ruins. Kind of using it as like a guide.
Oh,
sword that acts like a needle on a compass. Like if your loot goblin picks it up off a table and like, oh, sweet sword, and then all the time it's trying to get to its goal, which is probably wherever the wizard or whomever wants it to, it's just like yanking them around with its 50 fly speed.
Oh man, imagine a hovering goblin just hanging on to a flying sword.
Yes.
That would be hilarious.
All right, I got another scenario for you guys. So the party is in a large city. They maybe go through a market, and there's a halfling selling a bunch of weapons. The party is excited. These weapons are pretty not expensive. They're cheap. You can get like a good swords and stuff. But as the party sleeps in the tavern tonight, all the weapons animate and return back to the halfling who's already left the town with the party's money.
Ooh, that's good. That's
good. Like I
good.
said, I love the animated objects. I think there's so much fun you can have with them. Yeah. Does anyone have anything else on social? Or go ahead if you do.
I don't know.
I have not for social.
So let's go to exploration. What kind of landscapes could you find these monsters? What kind of dungeons, bases, what type of area would you be able to find them?
Like I said, castle hallway. Like
Yeah.
If you're investigating like basically any type of castle scenario, whether it's like super lavish and bougie or super run down and dungeony, or if it's a wizard tower or a king's tower, like you could just have super ornate rugs and nice armor, or old shitty armor and
Mhm.
busted up rugs, but they all function the same. I really liked what Anderson said about like the animal themed rugs, just maxing out the health of like a polar bear or like a bear or something.
Yeah.
A tiger rug that just pops off, and you could reflavor like some animated armor as like, I don't know, like animal themed things. Maybe you're at like a hunter's palace or something.
Ooh,
He's got
I like
Mhm.
that.
Or like a tapestry could be like a rug of smothering, you know?
I was thinking
Yeah.
instead of a sword, you would use like the antlers of a deer,
Ooh, yeah.
and it would
Oh, hell yeah.
gore people with its 50 fly speed.
Oh, that's sick.
I like that,
That
a
would
lot.
be sweet. Just the flying deer head.
Absolutely.
These are coming after you. There's deer heads flying around. A tiger cart.
So, what are your thoughts of reflavoring the rug of smothering into those like cords of beads you see in stereotypical hippies'
Ooh.
houses
Okay.
and
Well, I didn't even
movies?
think of
And
that.
you just walk through, and they all just tangle and
Yeah,
wrap
I like
around
that a
you.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there's so many different ways you can like reflavor it.
that's
Based on the context. They
Yeah.
belong anywhere, really.
right, and that's why I'm kind of
Yeah.
like what I said, I like the 3.5 edition better. Like, it doesn't give you like the rug of smothering ability to smother and stuff, but it gave you a little bit more like able to like customize these things. But I mean, I still like what we got. We still have like
Mhm.
animated armor, and you have your flying weapons and stuff. For location, I'm a sucker for Scooby Doo. So
Yeah.
the party walks
Okay.
up, the party goes to a mansion, lightning flashes, they go inside. Scooby and Shaggy are walking off. The rug slowly moves. They turn around. Boom. You also have animated armor that slowly moves, paintings that maybe wink at your party. Like you can have so much fun.
Can you imagine them? Can you imagine them capturing the armor? Like, let's see who this monster really is. Removes the helmet, and it's just empty. That's
Have a
funny.
murder mystery adventure and have someone die early, and at the end you find out it's the
It's
house.
just the
Exactly, yes, it's the house.
Or is it a Wizard of Oz style?
Monster House.
Monster House. Would Monster House be an animated object or a really big mimic?
Yeah.
Yes.
I like the idea it's a normal house, and in the basement is a Wizard of Oz style gnome that's just like clanging
It's a
away,
gnome.
controlling a bunch of like random animated objects, tormenting the kids that come to investigate the spooky house on the
Oh my
street. They're all
God.
scared off by like flying pots and pans.
Yes. Yeah, so much. Yeah, I also yeah. So what did I write? Okay, so I wrote for exploration, basics, ruins, like you can have these ruins of old wizards, like I said, or artificers, or maybe some long past civilization. They use them as guardians. You have the crazy artificer, so that could be your gnome living in the basement, who just keep making living things. I wrote docks, and what I think I made by that, like if you're in something like Forgotten Realms, or maybe in like a world that has a little bit more like high magic, that like it would make sense that companies and stuff would use animated objects to kind of guard their wares and stuff. So like I paired that with stealth missions. Like you could definitely, like if your parties are sneaking in stuff, like you could definitely use these as like
Sensor bots or something.
yeah sensor bots or all that.
So I was gonna bring that up. That's actually a really great point, because I was gonna say, imagine you have some kind of encampment, whether it be like a castle or a dungeon or a wizard tower or whatever it may be, and it is just surrounded by animated armors, like absolutely just like 360 degrees, like hundreds of feet out,
Like
and hundreds of
armor.
them, right? Not arm to arm, very spaced out, but close enough. And they got blind vision, blind sense.
Blind sense, yeah.
Was it blind sense? Is that what it's
Blind
called?
sight, oh yeah,
Blind sight of 60 feet. So after like a really high investigation check, you can see that in one part of this encompassing circle of them, a couple of them are a little bit farther apart than the others. And that is just a far enough gap to get between
Ooh, I like
both of
that.
their blind sights. And then now you're on the next layer of the circle. And you have to just keep finding the gaps to get through without activating literally all of the armor.
It'd be like a very like I robotics thing, like one animated armor goes off, then the next, and the next, and the next. They just all turn their head at the same time.
Yeah. At that point, it's just a race to get into wherever you're trying to go before they all beat the ever-loving crap out of you.
That's the thing about animated armor too, is they don't want to stab you, just like they beat you up with their fists. So exactly.
I mentioned like laborers earlier. I kind of like that too. It's like the wizard on top of the tower that just has like a bunch of animated armors around his house that do everything for him. They're not just guards, but they're like the cooks, the cleaners, the tailor. He's got everything that he needs, like all in this one tower, but they all like share the same name. And if you try to talk to them, they all have the same conversation with you. And
Like,
oh my god.
Almost like Jerry from Become.
Basically, like they just all share the same sentence. They're like Jarvis or something.
Yeah.
And then at the very top is this wizard that just wants nothing to do with anybody. And if anybody tries to try any funny stuff in his tower full of goofy servants, they just all dogpile.
Absolutely.
That's hilarious.
Awesome. All right. So let's move on to combat. How would these fight? How would we use them in combat? I wrote only one note for this, and it's just if told to the death.
Mhm.
If told, like if it says apprehend, like
yeah.
But anyway, they're gonna not stop. They're not. These things aren't gonna flee or run away or anything. Like they don't. It's that part in Rick and Morty where the butter asks what its purpose is, and it has one purpose.
This is your purpose. Oh my god.
So, yep, go ahead.
So, I think one of the biggest how do I word this? One of the nicest and DM useful tool for any animated object is specifically for the flying sword or weapon, because they are small constructs. Animated armor is medium, rug of smothering is large. So with like a flying sword or flying axe or spear or whatever you choose, it is a small construct. So in my campaign, they were in a Temple of the Oracle, and they were walking down a 10 by 10 hallway. Well, 10 feet wide, not 10 feet, just 10 feet wide. And they're up, rows of two. There's about 5 or 6 of them. I think there's 6 at this point. And so they're walking a 2 by 3 grid. And there were 4 flying swords, 2 on each side of the wall. And they just went right past it. And I explained, like, you see some ornate swords on the wall, but I didn't really go much farther into it than that. And they were able to scoot by them on the map and in flavor concept as well without them impeding them physically, which I think is a really nice thing in terms of like space in the game, because sometimes D&D can get a little crowded, So that's always really nice when you can share spaces with them and all that stuff. So that's what I really like. That's my favorite part about any animated object so far is the weapons size.
Definitely, like you could definitely. So combat. I also had another idea how you can kind of make them unique. So again, I'm going to do an Eberron thing because I love Eberron, but there is a character in Eberron that my party one shot, but if he wasn't one shot, he is called the Lord of Blades, who is a Warforged who has blades on his shoulders. I think in a fight like that, it would be cool, like mid-fight, like somehow he like releases the swords and like around him, just maybe like 10 of them begin floating and like striking out, and they have their own turn, kind of using them as like almost like part of a boss fight, as like just like that, like they're part, like still part of the Lord of Blades, but they're like the flying sword stat block and stuff, and have their mind of their own kind of and stuff. And you could do that with like a lot of things. Like maybe you're trying to find an assassin, you get to an assassin, he pulls out a crossbow at the same time, 2 daggers fly out of his like belt and start whipping around the battlefield as he's trying to shoot. So it's kind of like these cool little minions that you can flavor. Or maybe you're fighting a warrior who's like armor like steps off and steps next to him as he pulls out his sword, and there's just like 2 now. So you can do cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, these fights aren't going to be like special. I don't think there's, other than the rugged smothering is going to be special. It's going to live in everyone's heart because that's going to be a fun fight.
Yeah.
But like animated armor and flying swords are just, they're what they are. It's going to be a slugfest.
You make D&D special. The way you play the game, like the way you do what you do, makes it special. For instance, recently a flying sword came in my face, so I grabbed it and did another flying sword with it. It's not.
That did happen.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, from this episode, I did run flying swords 2 sessions ago in one of my campaigns. So, as you say, I like these creatures a lot.
They're cool, but it's like, they don't have to be in an exciting encounter for it to be an exciting encounter. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense.
I totally make sense. I totally agree with it. That
what you have, it's what you do with it.
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely do a lot of cool things with these creatures too. Like we've said a lot tonight about it for sure. So let's wrap things up and do the last part of the show and talk about putting your own spin on the creature. We've already done a lot of that tonight, but is there any like cool ideas you guys can think about taking these creatures and making them your own?
I mean, I think we, like, depends on the context, really.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think you could definitely, if you wanted to you could put an undead flavor on all these creatures if you wanted to. You can make them spirits being controlling them. You'd have to change their stat black a little bit, but maybe like the animated armor is a spirit of a long lost warrior, but it just doesn't know it. You could do that. You could have multiple spirits stuck in like one animated armor, which might make an interesting character if it's like fighting with itself inside who's controlling it. You could, I think Anderson's idea of the Rook of Smothering being anti-theft is hilarious and a good way to spin these things in your own. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I think we have said a lot of really good things. So, on that note, like always, thank you all for listening. And next week we will be back with the weird insect horses. I don't even know how to describe. How do you guys describe the Ankh-Egg? Do you even
weird insect horses?
The weird insect horses of Dungeons and Dragons, as we talk about the Ankh-Egg, the large praying mantis desert insects that will probably eat your face. But that is next week. So, as always, like I said, thank you guys all for listening. And yeah, anyone got any plugs or anything?
Twitch.tv/bring the shame. Catch me there.
I'll actually plug mine too. Twitch.tv/farmgoat. On Thursdays, I'm going to be starting to run experimental tabletop games this week, the week of September 16th, because I think that's the day where we are recording. So actually, the week of September 17th, I am starting a 1,000-year-old vampire solo RPG run on there. So if you want to see experimental stuff, check out Thursday nights.
I'll be there.
That is today. I'll be there. Yeah, I'm gonna get set up because I'm gonna do that in 30 minutes. But I'm gonna start trying to run things on Thursday. Maybe like 1-page RPGs. I'm gonna throw out to like any streamers who want to come check it out and play with stuff. I want to start doing that Thursdays.
Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/20ordie. We play D&D live every week now. I'm one of the players. We started about 3 weeks ago. We just had our second session with 0 session included. There'd be 3 sessions. It is the Odyssey of the Dragon Lord adventure module made from Animagus Games, I believe it is. Super awesome module. It's super fun. If you're interested in that, come check it out. We got to.
What's your character's name? Gaia. Okay.
Gaia. She is a male siren.
Hell yeah.
Twitch.tv/Tevisar.
Yes. I stream sometimes.
He wears really cool hats and plays Stardew Valley.
Yeah, I play Stardew Valley with my totally real and not imaginary girlfriend.
Yeah, totally. I guess I'll put all those Twitch links in our show notes because, like, yeah, we are all doing a lot of cool stuff. We're very online, as everyone is during the pandemic. So, like,
we're building.
It is what it is. Anyway, thank you guys all. You rule. You can find our social medias. Survival Check on Instagram, Survival Check Show on Twitter, the DM Survival Guide on YouTube, and SoundCloud is also Survival Check. So you can check out all of our stuff there. I have not been posting that often on it, but I'm going to be because I honestly haven't don't know what to post on it, but we're gonna figure that out. So expect more social media presence from us starting this week. But yeah,
we're new.
we
Bear
don't know
with
that.
us.
We're figuring out. But it's fun. It's been a lot of fun, honestly. These have been super fun to make. And I hope for dear listener that you're enjoying it and get something out of it. Maybe think of these monsters in a new way. But yeah, we're gonna end this because I think we all have things to do. So have a good night. Thank you for listening, or good day, I guess. Thank you for listening. You guys all rule. We'll be next week. We'll be coming out with Ankeg, like I said, and yeah, be excellent to each other.